The humans' arrival on Valyria Prime. The sky burned crimson as the descent module sliced through the thick atmosphere of Valyria Prime, the capital world of the mighty Zorveni Empire. Below, vast oceans shimmered under twin suns, sprawling cities of luminescent crystal towers stretching as far as the eye could see. The capital, Silora, pulsed with the glow of technology far beyond human comprehension. Inside the cockpit of the small diplomatic shuttle, Commander Lucas Cade tightened his grip on the controls. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from sheer anticipation. Humanity's first diplomatic mission to the Zorveni Empire, a species so advanced they had only regarded humans as primitive insects. To the Zorveni, Earth was a mere backwater world, barely worthy of recognition. Yet, here he was, about to prove them wrong. Commander Cade, touchdown in 60 seconds, the onboard AI reported. Lucas exhaled slowly, his steel blue eyes locked on the holographic display, showing his approach vector. He had trained years for this moment. Humanity had fought tooth and nail for a place among the galactic civilizations, and this was their first chance to prove their worth, or be dismissed as nothing more than a cosmic joke. The ship trembled slightly as it passed through a layer of ionized clouds. Valyria's gravity was slightly heavier than Earth's, and Lucas braced himself as the landing thrusters fired, slowing his descent onto a designated diplomatic platform high above the surface. With a final hiss of hydraulics, the shuttle touched down. Silence. For a moment, Lucas remained seated, staring at the blinking controls, taking in the weight of this moment. Then, with a determined breath, he unstrapped himself and rose. First impressions mattered. He straightened his uniform, a sleek blend of Earth's finest diplomatic attire with subtle armor plating woven into the fabric. He wasn't just representing himself, he was representing all of humanity. As he reached for the hatch release, his AI chimed. "Atmosphere is breathable, Commander. No known pathogens detected. Caution is still advised." Lucas smirked. "Caution is my middle name." With a press of a button, the hatch hissed open, and the scent of an alien world flooded his senses. The air was rich with a strange blend of metallic sharpness and floral sweetness, as if someone had mixed ozone with crushed lavender. The gravity weighed slightly heavier on his muscles, but it was nothing he couldn't handle. He took his first step onto Valyria Prime. And then he saw them. 4 tall, striking figures awaited him at the base of the ramp. Zorveni. Their skin shimmered like liquid sapphire, shifting in hue as the light touched them. Their eyes were luminous, deep pools of violet and silver, analyzing him with unsettling intensity. Their features were ethereal, neither completely humanoid nor completely alien, graceful, regal, untouched by time or weakness. The tallest among them stepped forward. Her silver-white hair cascaded down her back in elaborate braids, adorned with floating crystalline ornaments that defied gravity. Her violet eyes held a mixture of amusement and thinly veiled disdain. "So, the humans finally crawl out of their mud ball," she mused, her voice smooth yet edged with condescension. "I had expected something more." Lucas clenched his jaw, but kept his composure. He had anticipated this. The Zorvani were known for their arrogance, their belief that no species could match their intelligence, their evolution. He wasn't here to beg for recognition. He was here to command it. Commander Lucas Cade, representing Earth and the Terran Alliance. He introduced himself, his voice steady. "I appreciate the warm welcome." One of the Zorvani behind the leader, a shorter one with spiky indigo hair, let out a laugh. Sharp, mocking, dismissive. "Warm welcome. You misunderstand. Human. We are here for amusement, not diplomacy," she said, folding her arms. "This is the first time we've seen one of your kind up close. Consider yourself a novelty." Lucas refused to take the bait. He remained still, his expression unreadable, letting silence do the work for him. The leader tilted her head slightly, watching him with renewed interest. Not as weak as I expected. Perhaps there's more to you than your primitive technology suggests. Lucas held her gaze. You might find that humans are full of surprises. A slow, predatory smile curled on her lips. We shall see. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Too close. Lucas resisted the urge to move back. This was a test. I am Lady Azaria, highborn of the Zorvani Science Council. And these are my sisters, Nera, Valia, and Sora. She gestured to the three other women, each equally stunning, yet their gazes varied. One with curiosity, another with thinly veiled amusement, and the last with utter indifference. Azaria's violet eyes flicked over him, lingering on his face with an expression of mild fascination. Tell me, Lucas Cade of Earth, are all humans as unremarkable as you? A lesser man would have bristled at the insult. Lucas smirked. If we were unremarkable, we wouldn't be standing here right now. A glimmer of something flashed in her eyes. Annoyance. Interest. He couldn't tell. But what he did know was this. The Zorvani had underestimated humanity, and by the time this mission was over, they would never make that mistake again. Azaria gave him one last, lingering look before turning on her heel. Come, human. Let us show you what a true civilization looks like. Lucas followed, his heart steady, his mind sharp. First contact had begun. And so had the game. The illusion of inferiority. Lucas followed Lady Azaria and her companions through the towering crystalline structures of Silora, the capital of Valyria Prime. The city itself felt like a living entity, its translucent spires pulsed with soft iridescence, shifting in hues as if reacting to some unseen force. The air hummed with energy, neither too warm nor too cold, perfectly balanced in a way that felt unnaturally controlled. Lucas could hear whispers of anti-gravity technology humming beneath his boots, subtle distortions in the air that suggested something beyond his understanding. Yet, he refused to be awed. The Zorvani expected him to be overwhelmed, to stare in wide-eyed wonder like some primitive creature witnessing fire for the first time. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Azaria walked slightly ahead of him, her pace deliberately slow, almost taunting, as if daring him to fall behind. The other three, Nera, Valia, and Sora, flanked him, their movements graceful yet calculated, observing him like scientists studying an anomaly. Lucas broke the silence first. Impressive architecture. But it must be tedious, maintaining a city with this level of energy consumption. What's your primary power source? Azaria cast him a sidelong glance, a smirk barely visible on her lips. Curious little creature, aren't you? I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. The lesser species always ask the most predictable questions. Lucas didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he redirected the challenge. It's not curiosity. It's analysis. You could easily generate a self-sustaining power grid using a planetary core harness, but judging by the electromagnetic signatures, that's not what you're using. He glanced up at the shifting sky. You're drawing energy from the ionosphere, aren't you? An atmospheric energy siphon. Efficient, but vulnerable to charge disruptions. Silence. Azaria's footsteps slowed for half a second before she resumed her pace. Nera and Valia exchanged glances. Sora, the quietest of the three, narrowed her eyes slightly at him. Lucas smirked to himself. They had expected ignorance. Instead, he had forced them to recalculate their assumptions. Finally, Azaria chuckled, the sound both amused and irritated. A keen mind. I see now why your kind made it this far. Lucas shrugged. Humanity is full of surprises. Azaria stopped before a massive entranceway carved into the base of a looming crystalline citadel. The structure looked impossibly smooth, as if sculpted by forces beyond nature. The archway had no visible doors, yet as Azaria approached, the walls shifted, liquefying and reforming in a rippling wave of solid light. Lucas took a careful step inside. The interior defied logic. The space seemed infinitely vast, with platforms suspended midair, floating like islands in a sea of luminescent mist. Strange geometric symbols flickered across the walls, shifting and rotating like sentient thought patterns. Hovering above a massive central dais was a monolithic construct, a massive sphere pulsing with energy, a fusion of organic and artificial design. Lucas's gut tightened. Whatever this was, it was powerful. Azaria gestured towards the construct. The core nexus of Xylora. It is the seed of all knowledge, the very heart of our civilization's wisdom. Every calculation, every advancement, every thought the Zorvani have ever had, preserved and processed within its quantum lattice. Lucas folded his arms. So, a glorified archive. Nira let out an amused scoff. Typical human. Assuming knowledge is just something you store and forget. The Nexus is not just a record. It evolves. It analyzes and predicts. It guides our civilization, ensuring perfection in all things. Lucas met her gaze evenly. Perfection, huh? Must be exhausting. Velia, the one with flowing braids woven with luminous threads, raised an eyebrow. And what do you mean by that, human? Lucas gestured around. I've noticed something about your world. It's pristine. Too pristine. No imperfections. No natural chaos. No unpredictability. That's not how civilizations evolve. You call it perfection, but it looks more like stagnation. Azaria's smirk faltered. Lucas could feel the shift in the room. He had struck a nerve. Careful, human. Azaria's voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it now. You are walking dangerously close to blasphemy. The Zorvani have ruled the stars for thousands of years. We do not stagnate. We ascend. Lucas stepped forward, looking directly at the pulsing nexus. And yet, for all your advancement, you still fear change. The words hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time, Azaria didn't have a sharp retort. Instead, she studied him, as if seeing him through a new lens. Lucas took the opportunity to press further. That's why I'm here, isn't it? Your people may pretend otherwise. But the truth is, you're curious about us. About humans. You want to know why we survive. Why we adapt. Why we don't kneel to those who think themselves superior. A long silence. Then, Azaria smiled. It wasn't a mocking smile this time. It was something else. Something dangerous. Perhaps there is more to you than I expected, Lucas Cade. Lucas tilted his head. And perhaps you Zorvani aren't as perfect as you pretend to be. For a moment, the tension in the air crackled, like the calm before a storm. Then, Azaria stepped closer. Too close. Lucas held his ground. Her violet eyes gleamed with something unreadable. You intrigue me, human. I think I shall enjoy studying you further. Lucas swallowed, his heart pounding not from fear, but from something else entirely. This was more than diplomacy. This was a game of power, and the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. The game begins. Lucas could feel the shift in the air as Azaria stepped even closer, her violet eyes gleaming with something unreadable. It wasn't hostility. No, this was something more calculated, more dangerous. A challenge. His instincts screamed at him to tread carefully. The Zorvani were not just another alien species. They were an empire of perfectionists who had dominated the stars for thousands of years. And yet here he was, a human, standing in their most sacred halls, defying them with nothing but words. He had their attention now. But was that a good thing? Azaria finally stepped back, her lips curling into a slow, knowing smile. Tell me, Lucas Cade, what is it that drives your species? Lucas exhaled slowly, considering his words. Adaptation. We change, we evolve, and we survive. That's what we do. Azaria tilted her head. And that is what you believe makes your kind superior. The ability to stumble through existence, forever grasping in the dark. That sounds more like desperation than strength. Lucas smirked. And yet, somehow, that desperation has brought us here. A flicker of something crossed Azaria's face. Irritation. Amusement. Lucas couldn't tell. But he did know one thing. He was getting under her skin. The other three Zorvani, Nera, Valia, and Sora, were still watching him carefully, but there was a new glint in their eyes. Interest. Curiosity. Something dangerously close to respect. For a species that viewed themselves as gods, acknowledging a mere human was unprecedented. Azaria turned toward a raised platform near the Nexus and gestured for Lucas to follow. He hesitated for only a second before stepping up beside her. The floor beneath them rippled like liquid glass, rising to form a seamless throne-like seat for Azaria and a smaller, simpler platform for Lucas. The message was clear. She still considered herself above him. Lucas didn't sit. Azaria raised an eyebrow at his defiance but said nothing. Instead, she placed a single pale blue hand over the core nexus, and the entire room shimmered with light. Holographic projections of distant galaxies, planets, and star systems flickered into existence around them, forming an intricate map of the known universe. Lucas recognized some of the celestial formations, but many others were beyond anything humanity had ever charted. Azaria gestured, and the projection shifted to show Earth, a tiny, unremarkable blue sphere surrounded by its pitifully small fleet of ships. She let the image linger before turning to Lucas. "This is what you call home. A fragile rock, clinging to life by chance. And yet you stand here before me, proud of your survival." Lucas didn't flinch. He met her gaze evenly. A fragile rock that, despite everything, has endured war, disaster, and forces far greater than itself. And yet, we're still here, still pushing forward. Azaria studied him for a moment before the projection changed again. This time, it displayed a battlefield. Lucas's breath hitched. It was a war-ravaged planet, its once thriving cities reduced to nothing but ash and craters. The skies were blackened, the remains of burning ships drifting like dying embers through the atmosphere. It was a scene of absolute devastation. Azaria's voice was soft, almost mockingly gentle. This is what happens to species that challenge the Zorvani. This was the Dralic, an empire that once thought as you do. That survival was enough. That resilience was strength. Lucas clenched his fists. And what did they do to deserve this? Azaria's smile was razor-sharp. They refused to accept their place beneath us. Lucas felt a slow rage burn in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. She was testing him, trying to see how far she could push him. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction of reacting emotionally. Instead, he took a slow breath and said, "Tell me, Lady Azaria, do you enjoy crushing those you deem inferior? Does it make your people feel powerful?" Azaria's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Valia, the one with the luminous braids, chuckled. "He has fire, this human. I almost admire it." Nera smirked. "Almost. I think it's adorable. Like a small creature baring its teeth at a predator." Lucas ignored them. His focus was on Azaria. She had gone still. Too still. Then, with a slow exhale, she leaned back slightly, relaxing against her seat. "You assume we are cruel, Lucas Cade, but you misunderstand. The Zorvani do not destroy for pleasure. We simply remove obstacles. The universe is filled with disorder, and we are the only ones strong enough to impose order." Lucas shook his head. "No, you're just afraid of competition." A flicker of amusement and warning crossed her face. And then, to his surprise, she laughed. Not a mocking laugh, a genuine one. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human. Either way, I find myself entertained." She snapped her fingers, and the holographic battlefield dissolved into darkness. A moment later, the room shifted again. This time, they were standing in a massive open arena, carved from dark obsidian-like stone, surrounded by towering Zorvani structures. Lucas's muscles tensed. He hadn't moved, yet suddenly he was somewhere else. A simulation, a teleportation chamber. He didn't know. Azaria stood beside him, a faint smirk on her lips. I have studied humans, Lucas Cade. Your kind thrives under pressure, do they not? You claim to be survivors, fighters. Show me. Before he could respond, a mechanical voice echoed through the air. Combat trial initiated. Opponent selected. A massive, towering figure emerged from the shadows on the other side of the arena. It was a war machine, a fusion of alien technology and biological enhancements, standing at least 9 feet tall, its crimson eyes glowing with lethal precision. Lucas's pulse spiked. The Zorvani were testing him, and they weren't planning on making it easy. Azaria's voice was soft in his ear, filled with wicked amusement. Let's see if that human resilience is real, or just another primitive delusion. Lucas exhaled slowly. Then he smirked. You're going to regret this, Lady Azaria. The battle had begun. The trial of fire. Lucas's muscles tensed as the colossal war machine stepped forward, each of its movements deliberate, calculated. Its crimson eyes locked onto him, analyzing his every motion with an unsettling level of precision. It was a biomechanical construct, its sleek obsidian plating reinforced with what looked like living neural tissue, pulsating faintly beneath the surface. A creature of both metal and flesh, built for absolute efficiency in combat. Azaria stood above the arena, seated upon a floating crystalline platform, watching him with unapologetic amusement. I do hope you survive this, Lucas Cade, she called down. It would be a shame if our entertainment ended too soon. Lucas rolled his shoulders, loosening his stance. Glad to know you're invested, Lady Azaria. I'll make sure to put on a good show. He could hear Nira chuckle from her position beside Azaria. Oh, I like him. Azaria, can we keep him if he doesn't die? Velia smirked. That's assuming there will be anything left to keep. Lucas ignored them. His focus was on the machine standing before him. His opponent, his executioner, if he wasn't careful. A mechanical chime echoed through the arena. Trial initiated. Opponent. Human. Combat level. Adjusting. Lucas's stomach tightened. It was scanning him, calculating the optimal way to fight. Then, with a deafening roar, the machine moved. The battle begins. Lucas barely had a second to react before a bladed appendage slashed through the air, inches from decapitating him on the spot. He ducked, rolled, and barely avoided a second strike aimed directly at his spine. The thing was fast. Too fast. He had faced combat droids before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just a machine. It was an adaptive predator, learning in real time, adjusting its speed and strength with every move he made. Lucas twisted, narrowly avoiding another strike, and lashed out with a sharp kick to its lower plating. Metal met boot, and the impact sent a shockwave through his leg, but the machine barely flinched. Not good. Lucas didn't have enhanced Zorvani physiology. He didn't have superior strength or cybernetic augmentations. All he had was his brain. Adapt or die. Azaria watched, her fingers tapping lazily against the edge of her floating seat. Struggling already. And here I was hoping for a challenge. Lucas ignored her. His mind was working faster than ever. He needed to find a weakness. The machine lunged again. This time, Lucas sidestepped, letting it barely graze him as he studied the way it moved. Its joints were reinforced, but still had micro-delays between attacks. The plating overlapped at certain points, meaning there had to be gaps in the armor. He just had to exploit them. The first counterattack. The machine lunged forward, extending a serrated spear-like appendage. Lucas dropped low, rolling beneath the strike, and in a single swift motion, he grabbed a handful of loose arena dust and flung it into its optical sensors. The result was instant. The war machine staggered, its vision obscured, trying to recalibrate. Lucas didn't hesitate. He lunged upward, grabbing onto its plating, and with brutal efficiency, he slammed his elbow into one of the joint gaps near the shoulder. A crackling sound filled the air as something inside the machine snapped. "Interesting," Azaria murmured, leaning forward. Lucas barely had time to vault away before the machine spun violently, attempting to crush him in retaliation. It was angry now. Good. Anger made things predictable. The Zorvani realization. Nira leaned over, her expression shifting slightly. "He's learning." Valia nodded, her usual smirk fading into something more serious. Azaria said nothing, but Lucas felt the shift in her gaze. She had expected him to fight. She had not expected him to adapt. The final gambit. Lucas backed up, taking a calculated risk. The machine charged forward, and at the very last second, Lucas sidestepped again. But this time, he kicked off from the ground, launching himself upward. He landed on the machine's back, hooking his arms around its neck plating. With every ounce of strength he had left, he drove his knee into the base of its skull, wrenching its head at an angle it wasn't designed to withstand. The machine convulsed. Then, silence. The crimson glow in its eyes dimmed. Then, with a slow mechanical groan, the machine collapsed. The aftermath. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Lucas stood there, chest rising and falling, sweat dripping from his brow. Then, slowly, he turned to face Azaria. She sat there, still graceful, still poised, still unreadable. Then, to his shock, she clapped. Slowly, deliberately. The sound echoed through the arena. "Fascinating," she murmured, her violet eyes locked onto his. Nira let out a low whistle. "I think I'm in love." Valia chuckled. "Careful, Nira. You might scare him away." Azaria finally stood, her elegant form descending from the floating platform as she approached him. Lucas stood his ground. Azaria stopped a few feet from him, studying him as if seeing him for the first time. "You surprised me, Lucas Cade," she admitted, her voice lacking its usual mockery. Lucas wiped sweat from his forehead, exhaling. "I tend to have that effect." Azaria smirked, tilting her head slightly. Then, without warning. She reached forward and placed a single cool finger against his chest. Lucas froze. The air between them shifted. Then, she leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. I want to see what else you're capable of." Lucas's breath caught for just a second. Azaria pulled away before he could respond, turning to her sisters. "Prepare the human for the next phase," she said smoothly. Valia raised an eyebrow. "The next phase? Are you serious?" Azaria's smirk returned, deadly serious. Lucas exhaled slowly. He had survived the first test, but something told him the real game was only just beginning.